Dr. Marilyn Christensen with the City of El Paso, their veterinarian, and I'm here to talk a little bit this month about abuse and neglect. We get a lot of questions about what is actually abuse and what is neglect, and I want to start out by saying that when I got out of vet school, it was very difficult for me to accept that just because someone else didn't treat their animal in the same way that I treated mine, that it didn't mean that they didn't love it just as much as I loved mine, and it didn't mean that it was abuse. So to start with, abuse and neglect are generally differentiated based on intent or by degree. And what I mean by this is that if you have a dog and you got him for Christmas and he was cute for the first couple of months, you put a darling little collar on him, but he got kind of annoying after a few months, so you put him in the backyard. And he grew and he grew and he grew, and his little collar that was so cute when you got him didn't grow with him, and pretty soon it was cutting into his neck and he was having some problems eating. Would that be animal abuse? And no, it probably wouldn't be. And right now you're thinking, oh, that's terrible, that just sounds awful. But the difference is, if you had that same dog and you had a collar that you might use for training fighting dogs, and it had a series of razor blades around the outside of it, and if while you were dealing with that very same dog, you picked him up off the ground at the end of a leash, so that not only was he cutting his neck in the same way perhaps that he did with the other collar, and cutting off his breath, would that be abuse? Well, certainly that would be abuse, because in the one case, you didn't intend to hurt the puppy. You just didn't pay that much attention to him as he grew. And in the other case, you knew by the nature of putting that collar on and by lifting him up at the end of the rope that he was going to have some damage. So sometimes the degree of the damage will indicate whether it's abuse or neglect, and sometimes it's intent. What qualifies as abuse? The definitions of abuse vary from state to state. They usually include some information about maiming, torturing, overworking, cutting, kicking, perhaps even raising them for fighting, or keeping them in conditions or abandoning them. Those can all be cases that are made for abuse. But you're not going to know unless, of course, you read your state statute whether one of those is included in there. But the intent of having that type of violent issue to it, that's what makes abuse. Okay, let's go on to how will I know? I don't know what it means to maim. What should I look for? Okay, the ASPCA has a list of things that they recommend you looking for that will qualify as abuse. Things like if you see a dog that does not have food or water, if you have a dog that's skinny to the point of emaciation so that you can see its ribs, so that it's not a high energy dog anymore, if you have a dog that's missing hair, marks on the body that aren't being treated, such as scrapes, cuts, slices, that could be abuse. Also the conditions in which that dog lives in. But remember that it is not just a dog that is unsocialized or a dog that hasn't been exposed to people. Don't mistake that as a sign of abuse. We often hear it at the shelter because we have an unsocialized animal that shies away when you reach for his head. Not necessarily abuse. So don't confuse those two. What do you do if you feel like there's something that you need to report? Depending on where you live, you're going to have different people that you report to. No matter who or where you are, if you call either the police or the Humane Society, they're going to tell you the correct people to investigate in your area. Sometimes it is the Humane Society, and they have certified officers that go out and do the reports. However, in our city, we have animal control. If you have a situation in which you think it could wait, it's not an emergency, but you just don't think your neighbor is feeding the dog as often, making sure that he doesn't kick over his water, a situation like that, then call 311. They will set up a welfare check. They can go out and find out, make sure that the animal's doing well, maybe follow up in a couple of weeks and make sure it's continued to do well. If it's something that's happening immediately, for instance, if your neighbor is beating the dog right now, of course you're going to call the police department instead. You really do not want to handle these things yourself. And the reason is that if you try and approach, not only do you run the risk of being in danger, but that you could threaten the ability to create a good case for a successful prosecution. This is Marilyn Christensen, El Paso City Veterinarian, reminding you that February is Pet Responsibility Month, and if you've seen my other clips, then you know what I consider responsible pet ownership. So, thank you.